Sweet. How are we both today?
Great, how are you?
Good. I'm doing really well. I think what would be great would be maybe just to start with a quick introduction about yourself before we just get into the questions.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You want to go first?
Yeah, hi, my name's Serena. I'm a strategy executive at UM and I'm 23 years old, which places me firmly in the Gen Z generation. And as Pia will tell you, I've been alive the same number of years that Pia's been in the media industry. So this is going to be a great conversation, a real meeting of minds.
So you were just born and I was working on reception at Starcom 23 years ago. So I'm Pia, I'm the Managing Director of PhD in Sydney. I've worked at many small, an indie and also many of the big agencies around town. And we've had a lot of enlightening moments in the last week, haven't we? So we hope to enlighten you guys a bit more too.
I think one of the fun things about being Gen Z and working in the corporate workforce is when like a manager's talking down to you or just, you want to just getting on your nerves. The best thing I do is just slowly place that back. It's like, when you started your career, I was actually just 4 years old and just really messing with them. So it's a really fun fact to do. So highly recommend it to people. And if you
use wisely, use sparingly.
And if you see a Gen Z do that to you, just think about your actions and how you can improve them. But just starting off, the first question we have is what's a workplace norm that's happened in your early career and how has it really changed from today? And I think I might give it to you, Pia, first.
Thanks. So obviously I worked pre-COVID because that was a long time ago. And we were in the office 5 days a week. You had to lie if you wanted to go to the dentist. It was stressful.
Yep.
I can't imagine doing that with children, my kids' age, because I'm always, needing to run around and do things. So flexibility's definitely changed. Even though a lot of people in Gen Z probably think that we all want you back to the office all the time and all that sort of stuff, I think a balance is good, and where we've ended up is probably a nice approach. So I'm really grateful for, the world chaos that COVID created, because it's given us the opportunity to, I think, be more human at work and, have moments of downtime and bring our best selves when we're in the office.
Yeah, 100%. I think as well, kind of reflecting on that, it's a funny question because I'm in my early career right now. I've only been in a corporate job for a bit over a year. So it's one of those things where it's and I'm sure we'll cover a bit later, but it's I entered into the workforce post-COVID. So all of those things about working from home and those rights that maybe we took for granted as Gen Z are kind of now being rolled back. And it's a bit of a confronting moment of being these norms that I thought were going to be the norm forever are all of a sudden kind of being rolled back, and I've had to kind of adjust myself and my expectations from the workplace because of that.
That's one of the expectations rules you just talked about,
Yep.
I think unexplored,
Yep.
because I see what we have as a complete gift and you guys are looking at sort of what we're taking away. And so being able to have a conversation and just go, what does that mean to you? Why is that so triggering? How can we do things better? I think will open up good conversation.
Yeah, and those the real importance of that communication has really been brought to light in the I guess background of that change, and I think those tools are really important.
Yeah. One thing that I've found is that when you were talking about you had to lie to go to the dentist, we've sort of seen this shift where work stopped when you left the office. Now it's sort of you're chronically online. When someone else gets a Teams message and it pings them, I get PTSD.
Yeah.
If I need to wake myself up in the morning, all I do is I just play a Teams notification ringtone on nonstop. So my question to you, just leading on to that, is do you like this idea of being chronically online when you grew up in a world where you could leave? And do you think that there needs to be that balance, or we're just swaying one way now where you always have to respond?
It's a good question. We're talking about COVID a lot, but in COVID, my therapist said you need to start and end the day by entering the back door of the house versus the front to sort of define those work times, which I found a bit of a joke at the time, but I understand the sentiment. And the similar thing, I always say to people, use your commute, no matter what time that is, to switch off. And so people who get in the car and do calls, I just don't understand those people because I'm podcast only. And so I think you need to have your own boundaries, reset, and if I'm online while I'm cooking dinner for the kids, that's totally fine. But if it's 9 o'clock, unless MJ's texting me because it's an absolute disaster somewhere, I want to be off,
Yep.
Yeah, and I try and model that for the team too. I think we all do where I work. Like it's nice to be able to say to people, go home. Like I don't want you online. And if calling people out on that too, like if you see them texting or whatever late, you go, get off. We'll talk about this tomorrow.
Yeah. Must be a bit challenging having your manager in front of you, in a panel. No. Good work. I was going to throw MJ under the bus, but I won't today. What about you, Serena? How are you finding this idea about being chronically online?
Yeah, well, I mean, Gen Z is quote unquote the digitally native generation. And so I think there isn't really a world for us where we weren't going to be chronically online. But I think the difference maybe is because we don't really know it before. I think all of the things that we've been told about how to not be chronically online are really online, if that makes sense. So I think it really helps to have, like older generations and like people like Pia, if you want to call it that, to be like, like you can log off and you can have these boundaries, because we might have some very strong expectations of boundaries when it comes to like mental health or when it comes to personal self-care. But we're still very much newbies into the office. And so it's like having those work expectations and work boundaries be made clear is really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. One of the people on my team just sent me an email on Saturday, and I just responded on a Saturday. It was like, hey man, like this time works for me to do work. Doesn't mean you need to. You're okay. Like enjoy your weekend. And I was like, oh, thanks. I'm just gonna go and do something else. And I think Serena's question for you is, what's one thing you think Generation Z could learn from other generations? Because you sort of touched upon it.
Yeah, I think those boundaries, but also just like, just to prepare for this, I kind of asked around the office, like the Gen Zs in my office, and I was like, what do you think you really would love to learn from an older generation? And they were like, I would really love to learn how to be more self-assured. And I think maybe, like we touched on it before, but it's like, I think underneath all of that, maybe like bravado of like boundaries and not wanting to be contacted after work and wanting to clock off early is really just a bit of like insecurity of like, am I doing this right? So I think having that communication, of expectations, but also of like being able to be, able to trust, I guess, the managers that you have. It's really important.
It's a bit off topic, but it's interesting because we talked yesterday about that settling thing and how you guys are always really pushing for progression and the next thing. And I said that I have like a theory that's completely unfounded, no research whatsoever, just observation that you guys, the younger generation, whatever we want to call it, are always pushing for the next thing, which creates or adds to burnout because you're never settled in the role that you're in. You're never settled on the client that you're working on. There's always something new, and I think that adds a lot of stress and complexity. And you agree with that, but then said it would be really interesting for our generation to sit you guys down at really key points in your sort of progression stage and go, you are progressing. These are the ways you're progressing. It doesn't have to be, a new role or a new client or a promotion. Like we need to call out the sort of micro progressions to settle you a little bit. And I thought, oh, that's so interesting because, it's a real frustration between generations to go, slow down, like you don't know anything yet, I always give the example, I had a client for 8 years, I could look at her face before she even opened her mouth and I knew exactly what she was gonna say. And that was relaxing, even though she was, difficult sometimes, because I knew what was coming, whereas I think you guys are always like ducks,
Oh yeah,
in the water.
and I think part of that comes from like that hustle culture of being like seeing everyone online and seeing how well they're doing and feeling like maybe not 100% of your needs or what your expectations are for what your role and what your career is being met in the current role that you have. But I think having that sort of like guidance and that patience be taught to you is really
the way
valuable.
You said it was we feel like we're not meeting our potential.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's such a light bulb moment because like you could be chasing your potential forever, like until you retire. So there's always moments where you're meeting potential. We just need to call it out more.
Yeah. Pierre, do you think someone from the generation above you sat you down though when you started me like, hey, this is how it's going to be? Or do you think that, because our generation, like if you look on TikTok, it's like, I'm 25 years old, I'm in this position earning X amount, here's how I did it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like the most insane thing, but what they don't tell you is like how they actually did it. Yeah. And so I'm always curious to know about what it was for a generation.
I watch those TikToks too, like I want to be an overnight success. Okay, I reckon my mentorship came in like a really relaxed and like it wasn't planned.
Yep.
So like it's probably a bad thing now thinking back, but my advice like that came from being around those people, like those older, more experienced people, on the weekends when we were pitching, for example, or at the pub on a Friday night. So you would have those moments where you'd corner the MD and go, okay, tell me what I can do better. And you'd be 7 drinks in, but it would be that situation. So I don't think people sat me down and went, in a meeting room, this is what you need to do. But there was lots of time spent with more seasoned people, which I think rubbed off on me.
Love it. And talking about the communication and sort of putting an MD into a corner, what's a communication habit or that just really drives you nuts? Is there anything out there that really gets you going?
It's actually not the pub cornering thing, but I do have a bit of anxiety before every pub event because I don't want to be bustled over to a corner. But it's actually when people on Teams write, hey, how are you? And then wait for you to respond. So for 3 hours when I'm in back-to-back meetings, I'm like, what the fuck do they want? I'd rather, I tell my team, I'm the nicest person ever, but I don't need any pleasantries. Don't ask me about my weekend. Just say, hey, where's that thing at?
Yeah.
And then I can go, it's here, or I'll get back to you soon.
I just say, hey, hope you've been well. So
Okay.
I don't need to
Do you
ask.
keep going?
Yeah. I'm just hope you've been well. Good
Don't
luck
leave
if
me
you're not.
hanging.
But,
Don't leave me
I
hanging
need
on
this
that.
Well,
going.
it's so interesting because I feel like Gen Z, there's so much subtext that we get from online conversations. So it's oh my God, did I use the wrong smiling emoji in that message to my director? So I think there's that really interesting gap of communication maybe of me wanting to have so much the perfect subtext in my online communication versus you being this is what I need to communicate, this is what needs to get done.
Yeah. One of the things that I really hate, and I don't know if you have friends who do this, if you have someone in the workforce that does this, I apologize on their behalf, but people send me voice messages.
Oh,
I don't want to hear your voice, number one, like that. Number two is call me if you want to get to me. And number three is I have to spend time. There's no way to speed up some of these messages.
Nah.
And so if you're giving me a 57-second voice message, text me. This is just an unfair.
Our attention spans are dead.
Yeah, attention spans. But also, when you hear someone breathing like that, please stop.
It's their personal podcast.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that Pierre, we brushed upon is just this idea about how life has changed after COVID. We were quite comfy in COVID, and then we had a work from home. I think this idea of flexibility in the workforce is really changing, and it's changing per organization.
Yeah.
But I'd love to know your thoughts on how you see flexibility in a post-COVID world, because we're quite far away. You don't see masks on the floor anymore. They're all gone, which means we're sort of back to normal.
So the first thing I'll say is there has to be trust. So if my team are in and out and about, I'm not keeping tabs on them because I trust that they will do what they need to do and they will be there when they need to be there. But I'll also sound a bit old and say that I think maybe younger generations underestimate the importance of the connection in the workplace, and overhearing what's happening in your team or with your manager, or being around the buzz, accidentally seeing a client in reception because you're there, versus being at home in your Ugg boots. That does have a place, but I think where we're at, the 3 days, I don't want to use the M word because I know that your generation doesn't like it, but the sort of mandated 3 days and figuring out how that looks for you, I think that's good. It's a good balance.
Lovely.
Yeah.
What about you, Serena?
Well, again, like I said earlier, it's kind of interesting because I've only worked post-COVID.
Yeah.
So all of those things that, work maybe considered luxuries, I thought of as more like privileges. Or not privileges, just rights that I should have.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of interesting, like having those rolled back. But I was also told like very early on, like it is really important to be around, and I think I kept that.
Yep.
So I actually think that maybe not so much. Might be me breaking the norm, but I actually try to show up as much as possible. I think like having that, like Pia said, like that interaction is really important. Like that learning through osmosis is just so valuable. And I do really encourage it. I think that having those work from home days is also really nice to be able to take a step back. But having that balance of like knowing when is the time to step back and when is the time to show up is something that's always really valuable to understand. And maybe that is something that like could be communicated more from less of a judgmental perspective of like you're not showing up, to more of a this is what you could be learning if you were here.
Yeah. It's really funny you say that. Like, I'm currently in a remote team. So there's 4 people in our team, including myself, and one's in Atlanta, one's in Perth, and one's in Melbourne. And so, like, they were like, oh, you can work from home. How good is that? I was like, no, like I'm going to get a co-working space in the office, because if you're at home for 5 days a week, you start having some really interesting conversations with your dog. You really need people to talk to and to riff off and to actually say, hey, how was your day? Sometimes you need to have that conversation.
I don't know if this is a generational thing or like a parent thing, but I love how younger generations love to bring their animals into the office, because I love animals, but I definitely do not want my dog anywhere near the office. Like, I don't want another thing to look after. That is my time to have hot coffee. You know, like not worry about escape artists, but like all the youngins are like, look at my dog.
I like other people's dogs because you get the benefit of patting them, playing with them. But then someone else has to look after them. So that's my logic.
So it's not generational.
We're going to do a bit of an exercise where I think there's a bit of a difference on how generations like to communicate. And so I'm going to give you sort of just, not a case study, but an example. I'd love to see how you think. So number one is when something's urgent. So something is really, so when MJ needs something done, and he needs you to relay it to other people, how do you want that message to be communicated to your team? And how do you want something urgent to be communicated to yourself?
So I will want a phone call, so we can get it done quickly and I can then move on to the next thing. If I don't answer, there's always a text, which is like, just in a meeting, we'll call you back. Or if they can't get me, it's like, hey, I urgently need you, or this can wait. But I prefer, as an oldie, to get on the phone and just hash it out. Have that 5 minutes, because it's way better than 20 emails.
So a phone call is probably the best way to get to you really quickly. Okay, what about you, Serena?
I think to be honest, I think if it's out of office hours, I'm not reachable. But that's just my thing. And I think that also as a junior, I'm like, if, God forbid, they need me on a weekend, the building must really be burning down. But I think if it had to be communicated to me, I would actually prefer like a text, because I think a text can communicate the top line urgency. If I need further clarification, it's a phone call away.
I find it really interesting. Like, my phone's always on silent. So people
same.
are like, oh, I called you. And I'm like, did you call me twice? And they're like, no. And I'm like, call me twice. And then get through. The first time it's going straight to voicemail. And just how that works. And similar to what you said, like, if you don't get to me, because I'm always on my phone, send me a text. And I'll be like, okay, shoot, this is urgent. Let me quickly call you back. The next one is, what is your ideal way of receiving feedback?
Oh, this is interesting. I feel like I want it on the fly. So like regularly and short. And it's got to be a mix of both positive and negative. So like, don't just grab me after that one negative thing, but like say, great job at some point as well. And I think if we do that, it normalizes being able to say, hey, that wasn't great, or we missed the mark on that meeting or whatever, but being able to just move on to the next thing rather than dwell.
So good, bad,
instant
when it happens, and just quickly fix it instead of waiting for a fortnightly review or sync or whatever happens.
And then don't hold on to it, you know, as the receiver or the giver, like you've said it, move on.
Cool. What about you, Serena?
I think, so when we were chatting, it was kind of like, I actually really enjoy when I get feedback that is, I guess intentional is the right word. It doesn't have to be right away, or it doesn't have to be like after every meeting. It doesn't even have to be like every week we schedule like a walk around the park or something. If you want to sit me down, I would rather you respect my time and be like, these are the things that I think you're doing great. These are things that I think you could be improving on. The thing I hate the most if I'm sitting there and I'm just like, this is just kind of a whole lot of nothing. Like, but I think that it is really important to like have that consistent feedback, because again, it's like we were saying, it's that trust of being able to like trust your manager that like this is like coming from a good place and like this is actually helpful for you.
Yes, it was interesting like about the one-on-ones, because I think everybody in our generation prides themselves on having a one-on-one with your team every week, and we're doing a walk around the park or getting a coffee, but you were like, if that's like, it's too frequent almost, you know? So I think we need to free ourselves like from the one-on-ones, because they take up a lot of time and maybe they're not hitting the mark with the other generations like we think they are.
Yeah, totally agree. It's really interesting. Sometimes one-on-ones can be really effective when you've got work and be like, hey, I need to catch you. At least I'm going to catch you in this time. But if it's a one-on-one for feedback every single week, sometimes you're like, what have I actioned in that time for you to give me feedback on? And just like, am I just wasting your time? And it's like, and I love when it's like a 30-minute meeting and like, I'm just going to give you 25 minutes of your diary back. I'm like, well,
Why do better
have
diary
this
time
meeting.
back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we're going to just break out into a bit of a table discussion for 10 minutes and go over just the first question, which is on the screen, where it's sort of this idea of purpose versus perks for your generation, as well as what our Generation Z cares about. So we're just going to start that discussion just for 10 and then come back and discuss it with the panel as well. I can see a lot of people talking, which is good, but we're going to go down to table 19 now, just to hear their thoughts, and I believe Chloe is speaking. Hello, Chloe. 1 second. Could we get the mic on?
La 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 la. Oh, there we go. We're good. So our table had a great discussion around actually the fact that we don't think we are loyal to companies. We're actually more loyal to the team and the people that we work for. If you're working for someone that you really respect, and going back to your fantastic presentation earlier around difficult conversations, if you're working with a leader where you can have complain up and have those difficult conversations, you can really build that respect over time. So we kind of really focused on that.
I love that. I like this idea about being loyal to people, not a company. And I think even when we see our generation, this idea of, you should stay in a certain company for 2 to 3 years because what would it look on your resume? Gen Z's going, no, we won't. If you're not providing that level of growth and opportunity, we're out. And that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
We were just talking about how you used to drink the Kool-Aid on a culture of your agency. I reckon I had 10 years where I didn't see my friends on a Friday night because there was always something better happening in media. And it just doesn't happen that way anymore.
Yeah.
It's an interesting shift.
Well, I was saying, MJ, we keep calling you out. I was saying, you actually brought up a really good point about how, maybe before, because the workplace wasn't as diverse and maybe it was easier to buy into a single culture because everyone kind of was thinking and maybe looking or feeling the same. Whereas now it's a much more diversified workplace, not just generationally, but all of the other things. It's a lot harder to for everyone to buy into a single culture. So I think it is really the people that make you stay.
By the way, MJ, just to let you know, Linda just came up to me a second ago and she told me, by the way, we just hosted this whole event to make MJ uncomfortable. So if we're not doing a good job, let me know and I'll speed it up a bit. Just letting you know, we have one more table discussion and then after that we have a Q&A with Dad and I. So just letting you know, give a heads up. If you see Dad and I both on screen, don't scream. But the next table discussion we have, which I believe is on the next slide, is all about development versus extra workload. So how do you view stretch opportunities such as working on a pitch? And when does extra work feel like a growth opportunity compared to when does it just actually feel like someone's putting something on your plate that they don't want to do and they're just giving it and handing it off to you? So we might give 5 minutes for that and then come back and have a bit of a discussion. All on? Sweet, sweet, lovely. Okay, party people, we've got one more table discussion. Do we have any volunteers or do we have a table? We have a table, beautiful. So we have table 18. Thank you, Linda. Who? Thomas, hi, how are you?
Sure. I'm good, thanks. How are you? Oh, my chair's falling over. That's a great start. So our table discussed where there's often a conflict between maybe one individual being really enthusiastic to take on growth opportunities, they want to excel their career, another finding that that's potentially seen as an additional task or ask and they're having an extra workload and it's too burdensome. So obviously it's quite a subjective thing, but when we actually looked at how this could fall apart or ways that different perceptions could be made, we want to put that back on the business to say, how is this being communicated? How is it being celebrated when this work is being happened? And how is it being shared across the business? I came from a previous organization where it was very much encouraged that people got involved in extracurricular activities, supported other teams, picked up other people's work when other members were away. However, when it came to our very stringent performance review cycles, which were very much based on KPI outputs and where your bonuses were being paid, none of that additional grey work was recognized. And so what we saw was a culture being developed over the years where people were attempting to do the bare minimum and hitting their actual job descriptions rather than actually helping out other team members because they didn't see it being recognised or rewarded during performance review time.
Yep.
So I think having a really clear, going back to those expectations
Yep.
and very defined processes and ways of working will really help facilitate a culture where everybody wants to contribute to the broader business goals and identify not only those being opportunities for their own personal growth, but for the growth of the business as well.
I love that. And there's two things that you said that really resonated. Number one is this idea about being celebrated. So being celebrated is really important. And if you're just doing extra work and people are like, thank you, you're like, okay, cool, great. Like, I appreciate someone acknowledging it. But acknowledging and celebration are two different things. And I think you took it one step forward that actually, if you're just celebrated, but it doesn't actually lead to a different outcome for yourself personally, which you were talking about, your team was financial through the bonuses and the KPIs and performance metrics, then after a while you're going to go, hang on, I'm doing all of this work, I'm helping other team members out, they're hitting their KPIs because I'm supporting them, but then what am I getting in return, which is quite interesting. I've got a question for you. Do you think this perspective shifts between generations? Like Generation Z, do you think that the people that you work with, do they have a different mindset to how this stretch work is?
Absolutely. I think particularly with Gen Z, it's taking them on a journey and explaining why this could be not only beneficial for them, but also for the business and how it's a symbiotic relationship.
Yep.
So I think, as you were saying earlier, Gen Z are very much about how is this going to progress my career? How can I get the most out of this? And if I'm not receiving this, I'm going to move on.
Yep.
So it's actually having an open conversation about that and also being realistic and setting those clear expectations so that you're not asking them every day to engage in a new stretch activity.
Yep.
It's actually defining understanding as well what areas they're interested in developing and then helping identify where they can put themselves forward for stretch opportunities that actually align with their own values and interests.
Yeah, totally agree. I think Serena and I were just talking about this idea that I think a lot of people think Generation Z is really scared of hard work. And I would sort of say the opposite, where if we see something and someone's giving us an opportunity we wouldn't have before, a lot of our generation will actually chase that out. What I think is the biggest challenge is, let's say, in finance, it's all about like working on a deal. And if someone asks you to help out with that, you're like, yes, I'm going to help that, similar to a pitch. But then if you're just constantly making pitch decks or helping out with deals and you know that skill, it doesn't really feel like stretch work. So I think people stretch it too much. And that's where the challenge happens.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like you said, Tom, I think it is like communicating that value to the person, to the individual, rather than you should be grateful for this opportunity. Because I think maybe our generation more than others are the ones that are going to be like, well, why? Why is it beneficial to me? And that does kind of come down to understanding maybe that individual's goals and what they want to get out of their job, their role, or even just like the skills that they want to learn. And that could be hard skills, like learning how to close a deal. Or it could even just be like the soft skills of like, well, we're going to be talking to a client today. Like you want to be able to like communicate with them effectively, like that kind of thing. And if that individual's expressed that interest, then I think 100% they'd be totally willing to jump on that opportunity.
I think the other thing is we're not looking for people who are working like dogs forever. We're looking for people who are curious, putting their hands up every so often saying, yes, I want to know more about that. Like it's an attitude more than the hours put in. And so I think as a leader, when you're saying, do you guys want to work on a pitch? Like there's really, if someone says, no, I want to respect my boundaries and, like I don't have time and space for that at the moment versus, yeah, but I've only got a few hours, how can that help? Or like, actually, I was really interested in that category, I'd love to learn more. Like that is almost enough, We don't want people smashing themselves, on weekends. We want people who are leaned in and curious.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, I think that's the end of this table discussion. We're going to have Q&A. So I think, Linda, we're just going to get mics roaming around to ask questions. Is that correct? There is a mic over
Yes?
there.
Okay. Hi, I'm Caitlin. I'm
Oh,
from Essence.
hello, Caitlin. I apologize. That's on me.
That's so fine.
Okay.
Yeah, this
cool.
is probably actually a question for you.
Right, let's do it.
I find the sort of generation discussion very interesting, and I actually don't quite know my own view on it because I think sometimes we draw these lines between, say, Gen Z and thinking about how they've entered the workforce, but how much of this is just being new to the industry versus people that have been in the industry for a while? Like, was Gen X having these same conversations about what do we do with millennials and how are millennials thinking? Is this just sort of a young, like a sort of always a progression into the industry as opposed to necessarily a generational divide?
I can talk about lots of industries because we work with lots of industries. This issue is across industry-wide. It's in banking, it's in finance, it's in media, it's in, fast consumer goods, is everywhere. So I think it's a conversation that we're not having, and we're not having well. So I think it's very interesting that, once upon a time, older generations used to know more than younger generations. Like once upon a time, I know you're gonna find this hard to believe, is that your grandparents knew a lot. But now with the pace of technology, what we're finding is sometimes the younger generation, like either around AI, around blockchain technology, sometimes the younger generations know more than the older generations. So the intelligence is at the younger generation end. The wisdom, we hope, would be at the older generation end, and there is that kind of, but I think it's across the board.
When I was a co-ord, though, did my CEO or whatever think in the same way that I'm like
Most definitely.
questioning? Yeah, like
Most
I think it's a human issue, right?
Yeah.
Like over time.
Yeah.
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 And also we're becoming much more egalitarian as a society. So, when I started work, your boss would say jump and you say how high,
Yeah.
right? And then everybody complains that their generation, the younger generations, don't do that. So if that makes sense, so yeah.
It does kind of depend on the industry as well, though. I think in media, we're very lucky in a way that, like, I think there is quite an openness to, like, intergenerational work and also more of an egalitarian, maybe, attitude. I think I've got friends who work in finance, and I was saying this to you earlier, but it is still very much like if the boss says jump or the boss says let's go for drinks till 9 p.m., it's like, all right, I'm in, I guess I have to be.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm not going to be asked to, like, help out on the next thing.
I totally agree. I think it's a degree thing, so I think you're right. In finance, it's much worse, but you're much more egalitarian in media, most definitely, yeah. Great, thank you. Round of applause for the question. I think that somebody else got a mic. Somebody else got a question. Linda, where are we? We had...
Sorry, I won't sing this time. Pia, this one's for you. You mentioned about culture and how we are not drinking the Kool-Aid anymore. 1 in 4 people are lonely, and I think we're losing our sense of belonging from work and not drinking the Kool-Aid. Like, part of me, actually, I used to work in the Kool-Aid. I loved the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
And I think we're losing that, and I just wanted to know your views and your opinion on that.
We talk about it all the time, and it's really hard because, millennials or Gen Xers are trying to build culture for Gen Zs, and we clearly have demonstrated today we don't fully understand each other. And I don't know, I think maybe it's like a old person thing, but like I've built, as I've sort of lost the Kool-Aid thing, I've built networks that are more important to me sort of outside work, so I don't feel like I've lost that, whereas I think when you're young and starting out, you need as many communities as possible. So what we're trying to do is get people to articulate what belonging looks like to them, and so that could mean the Alex on a Thursday afternoon for some beers, or it could mean book club, or it could mean run club, or it could mean, I don't know, going for a walk with one other person before work or whatever. So it's a worry. Like, it does keep us up at night, I think, but I don't know if there's necessarily one silver bullet that's going to fix it. I think we need to adapt to what is in front of us and just support each other. And I feel like we've just had like quite a sad 4 weeks. A very tragic thing happened in our agency, and it was really beautiful to see everybody come together and actually want to be in the office together. And so I think connection for me and belonging is now built in individual conversations, or 3 people in the kitchen being idiots drinking glasses of milk, or like a WhatsApp chat that we have with the whole agency. Like, it's micro connections that build to something bigger, I think, rather than everyone dresses cowboys and come to this thing, like it's going to be great, and everyone turns up and waits to go home. So I don't know if that answers the question. Micro connections.
I think one thing to add just from a generational perspective is that this idea of drinking the Kool-Aid has like a really negative term to it, obviously, but this idea of...
Yeah, people died.
Yeah. But this idea of belonging is still very much what Gen Z wants. And if you see certain industries, like if you walk in Martin Place, you see all of the finance guys with like the puffer jackets with their vests and their logo on it, and they're always looking so young with their clean RMs. I'm like, cool, that's what they want. They want a sense of belonging. They want to feel like they're part of a team. And I think back to one of the other panel discussions is that no one's really loyal to organizations anymore, but people are loyal to a team and to people. And a quick way to actually bind that is through a logo or a brand in an organization.
And yeah, oh, sorry. Yep. Oh no, I was just gonna say, like some of the things Pia was talking about, like having a swim club and like all of that, like is really beautiful because it's organic as well. Like and having like those, was it the Fridays?
Oh, Friday Flow.
Yeah, Friday flows.
That's where the whole MJ joke started, because I've started doing meditations on a Friday and he refuses to come, which is fine. He's in support, but he doesn't like to meditate, so that's why he got a lot of shit today.
But it's like something that's, because you
welcome,
have such a
MJ.
deep interest in it, it's
Yeah.
super organic and it's really authentic. And that building that, I think, comes from that authentic and organic point of view.
Lovely. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here and give the stage back to the MC. But thank you so much. And could we give a round of applause to our amazing panelists?
Well done.